that I actually understood that this was McVeigh in the tank. Events took place in my life. I was harassed. I had hang-up phone calls. The people that were investing in my film pulled out. People would say to me, "Did you make somebody mad? What's going on?" And I would have no idea what they're talking about. It wasn't until not only that I saw that I had McVeigh on the tape, but until a couple of years later when I realized that this was the clincher piece, that this was the piece that established that McVeigh worked for the government. He wasn't some lone wolf nut hating the government, and that his actions were controlled. As he himself told Terry Nichols and various other people, he didn't choose the targets. The targets were chosen for him. He was set up with people. People were instructed to deal with him. He was instructed to go along and cooperate and play the game as part of an anti-American right-wing nut or militia person or just a crazy person, but that was never the case. He was acting under orders, and he admitted this to several people.
Well, that's right, and we also have just the entire program we know was a false flag event, as the film A Noble Lie and other research proves. But in closing, when did you first discover that you had footage of McVeigh? Because you'd shot this years before out scouting. I mean, you may have answered it earlier, but just when did you first realize, wait a minute, I've got footage of this guy?
Well, I shot it on August 3rd, 1993, and I didn't realize that it was McVeigh in the tank until like 1997, when I had 2 hours of footage that I'd shot of various locations and people, and I was showing it to a friend of mine, and it just happened that this part in the tank of Camp Grafton came up, and my friend says, "Wait a minute, what is this?" He says, "Where did you shoot this?" I said, "Oh, that was at Camp Grafton in '93. And he says, "Don't you know who that is?" And I said, I don't know. He didn't identify himself. And my friend told me, "That's Timothy McVeigh. That's the guy who blew up the Murrah Federal Building." Since then, I've talked to people. I've talked to V.Z. Lawton, who is a survivor of the Oklahoma City bombing, who attended the trial. And he establishes, this is the man I saw. This is Timothy McVeigh. I've talked to Congressman Charles Key, congressman from the state of Oklahoma, who also establishes this is Timothy McVeigh. So this is the clincher piece, at least my part of the clincher piece.
No, it's a key. It's one of the most important pieces, and it just brings it all together, and it confirms all the other amazing evidence. Bill Bean, thank you so much for spending time with us, and I just want to again thank the filmmakers as well for helping get all the great researchers and people that have contributed and putting it all together in one film, A Noble Lie. And I also want to thank you for your courage under that harassment. A lot of other people would have backed off, but
well, you know, Alex, over 100 people were murdered that day. Little children were murdered. I have had people say to me over the years, you know, why don't you just, I actually had somebody say to me, why don't you just send the tape to Camp Grafton and then maybe they'll leave you alone? No, that's not what we do in life. We stand up for what's right. If we don't, life will only get worse.
You're right. Things have gotten pretty bad because a lot of folks just think if you give in to evil, that it's going to back off, but that's not how it works. Bill Bean, look forward to speaking to you again, hopefully on the radio. And again, we salute you, my friend.
Thank you, and I salute you too.
Wow, just an amazing individual. We're going to go to break and come back with another amazing patriot, and of course that's Stuart Rhodes, the founder of Oath Keepers, to look at the NDAA and the nightmare police state unfolding in America under the guise of protecting us from terrorism, but we all know, unfortunately, who the terrorists are, and denying that fact isn't going to make it go away, as Bill Bean just said. We'll be right back. It's Infowars Nightly News.
Ron Paul will be very dangerous for this country because he wants to bring troops like you back from your post from all over the world.
Well, I think it would be even more dangerous to start nitpicking wars with other countries. Someone like Iran, Israel is more than capable of.
All right, we just lost our tech connection, unfortunately.
A question for you. Do you recognize this guy? He may be the best kept secret in the race for president. He may be the best kept secret.
first hit the mute button whenever Ron Paul talks. The man's an ignoramus, and his views are entitled to zero respect.
I love what I'm doing. In fact, I have a great club that's 15 minutes away. By the way, Ron Paul cannot get elected, I'm sorry to tell you.
The isolationist wing of Ron Paul.
The fact is, his views on foreign policy, I think, are stunningly dangerous for the survival of the United States.
He's unelectable at the end of the day.
You wouldn't support a nominee like that?
There are nominees that I'm not enthusiastic about. They haven't gotten the nomination, not likely to get the nomination.
So you're ruling Ron Paul out?
I am.
Freedom!
Now, the question is, the cheering is happening here for Ron Paul in the stadium.
We're at war here in this country, internally, and this is where our biggest enemies are, and we need to get up off our ass and do something about it. So I will sing Ron Paul until the last ballot is cast. I will not stop fighting.
So Ron Paul becomes president, the Republicans, the Democrats, the media, they're out of business. Their Ponzi scheme on America is over. It's done.
In Washington, D.C., we frequently have resolutions being passed that rubber stamp the foreign policy of intervention. But they always get passed usually nearly unanimously. Maybe there's a few, and sometimes there's only one opposing the resolution. Our campaign got more money from the troops than all the other candidates put together.
Freedom!
Don't get involved in these wars and just bring our troops home. The more we threaten, the more we intimidate, the more we want to bomb people, the more we're leading into another fiasco like Vietnam. We trade with Vietnam now. That's a much better way than trying to impose our will on Vietnam by going over there and dropping bombs. So I would say that this just points out again that we have a very, very poor foreign policy in the Middle East.
Holding up my sign, Ron Paul for president. That's right, folks. T-Mont out here, boots on the ground.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had nuclear weapons, and we had to go in. I'm sure you supported that war as well. Okay. It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars. A true patriot defends liberty and the people.
But you know, some of our opponents have labeled us, and I just want to talk about that for a minute. They call us dangerous.
The true patriot will repeal the Patriot Act.
Oh, gosh, there's so many things to say. Representative Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on today. You are such a breath of fresh air. You must be an endangered species down there in Texas. That's all that I can say, first of all.
I will stick to my guns if put in that office and protect the Constitution.
So who are his supporters?
We're not talking about 10,000. We're not talking about 100,000. We're talking about many American, millions of people in this country and around the world who have heard this message, and it's growing, and it seems like even if they try, they can't stop us.
Our campaign is all about freedom, prosperity, and peace.
And we are back now with the conclusion of this edition of Infowars Nightly News with another patriot. And before we go to Stuart Rhodes, I thought I would read this wordy quote from George Washington, because every day we're going to have a patriot or a control freak quote. We're going to have give you quotes from the globalist and other control freaks throughout history, and quotes from patriots who stood up for human liberty. And here's the George Washington quote: "Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interest." George Washington. And basically that's saying dupes and sellouts will never stand up against corruption, so they will be given the largesse of the government chest or of the tyrant. But those who won't go along with it will end up being labeled as the terrorist and being rounded up. So that's basically what George Washington had to say for us on that point. Now, I had Stuart Rhodes, founder of Oath Keepers, on the radio for about an hour today, getting into the history of military commissions and secret arrest of citizens and basically martial law in America, now that the NDAA is law. And he's the founder and director of Oath Keepers. He served as a U.S. Army paratrooper until disabled in a rough terrain parachuting accident during a night jump. He's a firearms instructor and a former member of Representative Ron Paul's D.C. staff. He's also written for SWAT magazine. He's a graduate from Yale Law School, where he won one of their most prestigious awards, Solving the Puzzle of Enemy Combatant Status. It won Yale's Miller Prize for Best Paper on the Bill of Rights. And he also was taught for the U.S. military history at Yale. And it just goes on from there. He's a real expert on the dangers of applying the rules of war to the American people. And he joins us to condense the history of where our republic has come from and where it's going. The same problems we face today we've been through before. And the tyrants are pretty lazy. They just rewrite old stuff that's already been overturned. And then I wanted him to basically have a call to the police and military to choose who they will serve, because the NDAA, though we fought it, has really done something good. It's a silver lining. And that is, it's really proven for everybody that we do have a criminal government at the top and that they really are tyrants. And it's woken a lot of people up. So the wheat is being separated from the chaff. Stuart with oathkeepers.org, great to have you here with us. You've got the floor, my friend, for the next 20 minutes. Tell us where we stand.
Well, the bottom line is what's happening to us right now is exactly what happened to the founding fathers that compelled them to take up arms in defense of their traditional rights as Englishmen and also in defense of their natural rights as human beings. And the exact same causes and grievances that they suffered, we are suffering now. Among those listed in our Declaration of Independence were denial of jury trial and the attempt to make the military superior to the civil power, and also the claimed power to whisk a colonist overseas to be tried in England rather than in front of a jury of their peers in the colonies. And one more charge against the king was that he was attempting to subject them to a jurisdiction foreign to their constitution. And this bill and the prior actions of two administrations now, both Bush administrations and the Obama administrations, do all of those. The claim is that the powers of the commander-in-chief during wartime apply not just to a foreign enemy, but also apply to Americans, and that Americans can be treated exactly the same as a goat herder in Iraq. If a goat herder in Iraq is accused of stealing a neighbor's goat, well, he'll get a normal Iraqi trial. But if the U.S. military thinks he's a member of the resistance, then they will just pick him up. Or if they think he's supporting the resistance, they'll just pick him up and put him into military jurisdiction, and he'll wind up in Guantanamo. And the claim is that they can do the exact same thing here at home. Our Constitution, from the very beginning, has had a sharp line of separation between what can be done to a foreign enemy and what can be done to an American citizen. An Iraqi cannot be accused of treason because they don't owe any loyalty to the United States. A U.S. citizen or lawful resident, on the other hand, can be accused of treason because we do owe loyalty to the United States. And that's exactly what's supposed to be done with an American who's accused of making war against the United States or aiding its enemy. As the Article 3, Section 3 treason clause in the Constitution plainly states, it defines treason as consisting only in levying war against the United States or adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. And it says no person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. So there are extra protections. There's requirement for two witnesses, not just one, and not secret evidence or secret witnesses, two witnesses, and or confession in open court, because the founders had experienced denial of jury trial. Parliament had passed laws that stripped away jury trial in certain cases. They had passed laws to expand the jurisdiction of the admiralty courts.